All right, we're going to be walking through the setting up your playback engine and IO project. Our big goal here is we really just want our ins and outs set up and our playback engine optimized so we're ready to use it inside of Pro Tools. So the first step we're going to do is open Pro Tools. But the second step that has to take place here kind of feels awkward, but the first thing you're going to see is this screen is going to open and we do not need it yet until our playback engine and our IO are set up. So essentially, we'll step one, open Pro Tools. Step two, let's cancel this window. Step three will be you will go to Setup, Playback Engine. From the playback engine here, you need to select your device from the playback engine device list, whatever device you're using. If you're only using built-in stuff, the aggregate is designed in Pro Tools to combine your built-in input and output so they're both usable. Otherwise, if you just select either just the input or the output by themselves, you can't use them simultaneously. So if you don't have any interface connected, please choose Pro Tools Aggregate. Otherwise, choose your device. Then select your hardware buffer size. Your hardware buffer size will be based upon the amount of processing you need while you're working with your session. If you're recording, we need to lower the samples so that there's not a lot of latency or delay between the time you play and the time you hear it come back from the digital representation. If you're processing or mixing, you need that to be a higher sample rate. If your system's just not effectively playing, you just need to keep raising it until you find a value that it allows it to play. So for a great example, when I'm using a lot of virtual instruments, I can't be as low as 32. Sometimes I have to be at 64 or 128. But if it's just me recording a voice, 32 is completely acceptable. And then when I go to mix down, a lot of times I do want my mix down power set to 1024. Now, there's a bunch of things that are down below that are in a more advanced category that we will talk about later. Immediately, you can elect a few of these. Most importantly, if you're not going to use video, that's fine. You can deactivate it. The dynamic plugin processing is useful, so I would keep that checked. But notice there is optimized performance at low buffer sizes. Certain plugins may cause brief system hangs and ignore errors during playback or recording. You want to deselect the ignore errors during playback and recording. And what that does is if there's an error, it'll actually record it while you're recording and you'll end up with clicks and pops on your audio. We don't want that. You can optimize performance at lower buffer sizes. You can leave that selected. And then the disk playback cache is essentially how much it is going to be utilized or focused from your RAM to supply caching in terms of being able to bring small packets of information from your drive. I would select at least 8 if you have it. If not, then you can go lower. But for me, I usually use a higher one, so that's fine. So you're going to select that, and then you hit OK. So the playback engine is set. Part 2 of this is setting up your I/O. Go to I/O. And in your input, you're just going to click on all of them to reset these and make sure these are mapped the way they're supposed to be. You're going to click on one, select Command A, delete them, and then choose default. In the output, you'll do the same thing. Click one, Command A, delete path, default. What this does is it makes sure that whatever interface you are using is mapped specifically for the inputs and the outputs off that device. Additionally, you'll go to the bus. You'll do the same thing. This part's a little different. Oops. It'll let me get there. Select all, delete path, and hit. Before you hit default, notice there's an option for all buses, output buses, internal buses. You're going to want all buses. But you'll notice that there's a lot fewer internal buses applied. You actually have to manually create more if you need them. If you feel like you will need them immediately, you'll hit new path. You can make an abundance of these, but let's just say we decided to create 32 stereo bus paths. We need them in stereo, and if we want to select auto create subpaths to create the paths that go below, watch what happens. Now it created a continuation of buses. Now these are all internal, but now we have buses all the way up through 88 available. These internal buses are used for effects or submix routing. The most important ones, though, are your output routing mappings, which you can see here. The mapping to output, this is your main out. And any additional outs, you'll see this one has a headphone out. As long as this is great, you can press OK. One more side note before we do that, though. There is an export option. I highly encourage you to utilize it. If you select export and your mapping IO was great, what you're going to do is you're going to name your IO setup. And what I want you to do for the basis of this project is the two most important things at the end is you're going to take snapshots of these. But you don't have to actually send me this IO setting. This is for you only. You're going to type in, whatever setup this is. So maybe this is, your interface setup. So let's say I just called mine based upon my interface name, which is my Apollo Twin. And I can save that, and it's going to save it so that I can import it later. If I, instead of having to do all those steps, I can now just hit import and bring in this file and be good to go. Additionally, once you're done, your final step here is to hit OK, and now you're finally ready to create a new session. You can go to File, Create New Session, and begin. Before you do that, your last two steps for me in submitting your project are go to the Playback engine and create a snapshot. It's different on PC than it is on a Mac. On your Mac, you can use Command Shift and the number 3. And notice it'll drop a snapshot of that image. Or you can use Command Shift number 4 and highlight just the specific part of the image. And then you're going to do the same thing with the IO. You go to IO and you're going to snapshot these images. So I'm going to use the Command Shift 4 for these. And I need Command Shift 4, Command Shift 4, Command Shift 4. Now, when you make your snapshots, it's important to keep an eye on where they're coming from. And so, particularly if you're on a Mac, what you're going to be looking for in your file system, if you go to if you go to the Finder using Command Tab, and you go to the Finder smiley face, when you go to your search bar, you should be able to put screenshot. And notice that mine didn't actually give me any. And that's because all of mine are actually over here. I have mine set up to my external drive. And so you can see where those locations are. If you click on one, you'll see the location list at the bottom. If you're wondering, where did they go? If you click on these folders or hover over them, you'll see them highlight. They'll say, oh, where are they coming from? And then you can find that folder location. Or you can drag it right out of here and submit it. But what you're submitting today are just snapshots of, or screenshots of the IO setup and the mapping, the IO mapping. Sorry, what you're setting up today or submitting today are the screenshots of your IO mapping and your Playback engine setup. And that's it.